Thank you, Joanne, and thank you all for asking us to share about a topic that we're passionate about. And I must say, it is no joke to try to fit it into 15 minutes. Title of our talk today is Playful Approaches to Serious Problems. And we really wanted to highlight the importance of play right off the bat as being the primary language of young children. It's the way they communicate, it's the way they learn, it's also our window into their experience. So for our handout for today, we've included a brief on play. And I think it's also a way to support relationships between parents and children. And that's why we wanted to start off and lead with play as being super important. All right, thanks. Next slide. All right, so our objectives today are to define early childhood mental health, review the normative developmental tasks, help familiarize you with the circle of security intervention, and think about who needs to be referred to for specialty mental health. Next slide. All right, I like this image because I'm imagining all of you in your office with a child in front of you and trying to think with your mental health hat on who needs to be referred for early childhood mental health specialty services. And I want to try to make that a really simple equation for you. And I'm going to borrow from Fussy Baby's intervention. They would say that when we're thinking about these young children, you need to try to see the child that the parent sees. So even if what you do is a young child that is developing great, they look happy, they look healthy, but the parent is telling you, I can't soothe them, I think they're aggressive, they don't like me, any of these kinds of things, that should trigger us to think this may need to be a referral to early childhood mental health. Next slide. All right, so what is mental health? It's affect regulation, the ability to recover from dysregulation, the freedom to feel positive feelings like joy and pleasure and hope, but we also think it's important to feel negative feelings like fear and sadness and anger. We want to see trusting relationships between a child and their caregiver, as well as the ability to repair when there's a conflict between them. We want a person to be able to engage with learning and working, and also find meaning in life. And for us, we see all that in the context of the relationship between the parent and the child. So in early childhood mental health, it isn't just the child that is the patient, but it is the patient in the context of those important caregivers. Next slide. So here's an image of a pregnant mom touching her belly. And as you guys all well know, the Foundation for Mental Health starts well before birth. We know this because epigenetics tells us that this baby's grandmother's experience is influencing the expression of genes in this baby. And we also know it from some of the really lovely work being done by Ruth Feldman and also Catherine Monk about the way the baby experienced the birthing parents, the way the baby experiences what's going on in the birthing parent's life during the pregnancy. And so both of those women have some amazing videos out there on YouTube if you want to dive more into that topic. And this is also just a nod for the importance of doing those screenings for early childhood depression and caregivers around anxiety and depression. Next slide. So we can't do a presentation on early childhood mental health without also focusing on fathers. And we haven't, in my field, been traditionally very good at thinking about this. We've focused a lot on the dyad, meaning mothers and child. And now we need to open that up, and we're thinking more about triads, so the baby in the context of their relationship with both parents and what those relationships look like. So interestingly, in non-human species, caregiving is largely hormone dependent, but we know that's not the case for humans because fathers, as well as foster caregivers, all experience a shift in their hormonal shift in response to intimate caregiving of young children. We see decreases in testosterone, increases in cortisol, estrogen, vasopressin, and oxytocin, that neuropeptide hormone that's so important in supporting synchronous interactions between young children and their parents. I also want to highlight this work from Ruth Feldman's lab. This is a really interesting work that she did back in 2003, where they looked at 100 children in the context of their relationships with their mothers and their fathers separately when they were at play. And if you look, you can see that blue line depicts the interaction between an infant and their mother. And it goes from a low level of arousal to a moderate level of arousal in those interactions with their mom. And much of those interactions have to do with vocalizing, and that peak has to do often with a shared gaze. We see a very different profile when they looked at dads and their interactions with babies. Dads have elicit these high levels of arousal in their infants, and it goes way back down low. And then there's periods of no interaction at all. And we believe that the child's opportunity to experience these two very different styles of interacting is to their benefit and helps them learn more about how to regulate under different circumstances. Next slide. And I'm going to pass it to my partner, Susanne, to take over some of these developmental tasks.
Yeah, and so we're really focusing, as Sally said, on an early childhood mental health perspective, not a developmental perspective, although I'm a developmental behavioral pediatrician. So we're going to talk about some of the tasks and challenges you may see in your clinical settings. Physical aggression by toddlers is often one you'll hear about. Who bit who hit who, what's going on in the preschool setting or the daycare setting. I think what's important about this graph is the trajectory over time of aggressive behaviors. We all think of that as something that, you know, the terrible twos and the toddler ages. And if you can see, I don't know if Joanne could draw a line down at 24 months, but you can sort of see at the 24-month time, we're really starting, to see a downtrend in physical aggression by 24 months. And that continues normatively for the average child all the way through the preschool years. And so where concern really should be on our part as clinicians is for those children where either they plateau or they continue to increase after that 24-month period. Nobody who's had children of their own or who is a pediatrician thinks that all of this goes away by 24 months, because obviously, or even by 36 months, because obviously the 3-year-olds are having a lot of tantrums and dysregulation as well. But it should be trending down. It should be improving. Impulse control should be getting better. So again, to the question of referring, that's really a key time point and trajectory. Next slide. Obviously, separation anxiety is also absolutely normative. Every child pretty much experienced some kind of stranger anxiety or separation anxiety. This work that is depicted in the graph to the right, you can see that the normative population, and this is by far the majority of children, start low and remain low in their anxiety level and separation anxiety issues throughout the early childhood through preschool ages. There are other groups of children who start out really, really high. You've all seen them, the ones that have to get peeled off the parent at the daycare drop-off and are just really having a lot of trouble with separation. And a lot of those children also have a normative pattern of declining anxiety. But for those kids who start high and remain high, or start low and come up over time, those are, again, the children that we really want to be watching more closely. They're more at risk for having an anxiety disorder later in life. So thinking about early childhood mental health intervention as an option to support them early on. Next slide. I won't talk quite as much about this, but I think I think a lot of what the toddler experience is around discipline and around rules is a fear of losing love. And so assuring the child that love is a constant, and that that doesn't always mean that all behavior is okay, or that you're not displeased with certain behavior, but that the love is still there in the background. And I think for a lot of our parents with their own either depression or anxiety or other stressors, it's very difficult to communicate that consistently to children. And so that's another place where we in practice can be supporting parents, and where early childhood mental health, particularly with its focus on the caregiver and the child, can really be helpful. Next slide. All children have a fear of body damage and a process of learning that things like fingernails and hair get cut off and thrown away, and the rest of you sticks around, even if it's hurt, at least most of the time. And so, this is just to remind us all of that, of how important even a small boo-boo can be for a little one. And then next slide. And this is around fears. We all see the toddler fears, and I think that's often a focus of what caregivers understand. 2-year-olds are maybe afraid of certain things, of new experiences. The stranger anxiety makes people think of their babies as being afraid of things, but the real general fear peak is much closer to around 4 to 6 years of age. And so the monsters under the bed, the things that are hiding in the closet at night, those are older. You have to have a different understanding of the world around you in order to experience those. And so I think normalizing that for families, as well as watching for earlier onset of some of those behaviors and thinking about those children as higher risk and maybe needing referral, is important. But it's really much more right at the entrance to school age that we get a lot of those more generalized fears. Next slide. I think this is you, Sally.
Yeah, I'll take over this one. So this is the way we tend to sort of categorize the types of challenges that we see in this early childhood period, sort of that 0 to 5 range. Behavior problems such as hitting, biting, throwing. We have the developmental concerns when a child's not talking yet, or they're having some motor issues. We have sensory and regulatory problems, like I alluded to earlier. My kid who, when the sunlight hit his eyes in the car, was shrieking. So he had a real sensitivity to sunlight. So we're thinking about those kids who have trouble sleeping or eating. There's social challenges. So the child that's maybe being aggressive with their peers, or the child that is, for whatever reason, not interacting. So maybe we're worrying about autism. We have the relationship worries between parents and children, where a parent might feel overwhelmed. And then, of course, there's trauma, which we have gotten very good at treating, even with the very young ages. Next slide. So this is an image taken from Circle of Security, which is an attachment-based intervention that targets the parents of children 0 to 5, but honestly, there's application throughout the lifespan. And I'm just going to walk you through this real quickly. The parent is represented on this circle by the hands. And then we think of children at any moment in their life as being somewhere on this circle and having a need from their parent. And so when a child's on the top half of the circle, they have their exploration system engaged, and they're what we consider on the top of the circle, and they need their parent to support them as a secure base. So for a baby, this might just simply be their gaze. They're looking around. As the baby gets older, they're able to crawl away. As they're getting older from that, they're able to climb up on the play structure and may still need help being pushed on the swing. So those children, even though they're exerting their independence, still needs their parent with them to watch over them, delight in them, and help them. When a child's on the bottom half of the circle, we think of their attachment needs are being triggered in some way, and they're needing their parent to support them and provide a safe haven. So a child who might have just gotten hurt, but it doesn't have to be someone who's crying and screaming. They may just need to check in with their parent and get that emotional connection with them. Next slide. And so I want to use this as we watch this next clip. And I'm encouraging you as you watch it to think about your internal experience of the dyad, and if you just throw in the chat how they make you feel, because we believe that your internal experience of the families that come into your office are a good signal to who may need referral. And also, if you could think about whether this is a top half moment or a bottom half moment.
Okay. They need to work on that, right? Yes, okay. Did you understand it though? No. Okay. All right. Oh, no, not this one. This is the grand finale of this. Okay. Yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh yeah. Right, don't bring that again. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah.
Joanne, why don't we pause it there for the sake of time? I think everyone gets a sense of what this dyad feels like. And if you want to throw something in the chat, feel free to say maybe just a word that encapsulates like what you think this feels like to you to be, if you were in the room with them, how would it feel? Joy. Yeah, so this is a pre-verbal child. This is a dad who's attributing meaning to what his child is saying. If you watched it again, you would notice that the baby gesticulates and then the father gesticulates in almost the same way. And so that's what we think of as synchrony. They have synchrony between them going back and forth. There's nice rhythm. And I would also suggest that this child is probably on the top half of that circle because they're kind of exploring something together and his dad's there supporting his exploration of maybe they're watching something. I'm not sure what's going on. And I'd like you to contrast this. Let's just watch maybe 20 or 30 seconds of the next video. And if you could throw in how this video makes you feel. That's probably enough of that one. Any responses to this, the way this one felt? I think this one is harder for us to watch. Yeah, the child's feeling ignored. This is like a 2-year-old really wants that cup and the dad just keeps moving it from one side to the other. And you get the sense that this is a child who does need help organizing his feelings. So clearly on the bottom half of that circle. So we use that graphic. And yeah, I see you guys all using words like distance, ridicule. So I think you're really dialing into what's going on here. We know that you as pediatricians have access to parent report. We know that you also have access to some types of measures. And then we also just really wanted to highlight your internal experience of what it feels like to be with a dyad to tune into when there might be extra help needed. And I see we're at 15 minutes or beyond. So maybe this is the right place to pause or run quickly through what we have left.
You have about 2 minutes. So if you want to like one or two more things, that'd be great.
Okay, why don't we skip this slide and let's just talk about the resources we've included. So this comes, this slide is taken directly from the handout that we gave you that just harkens back to the importance of play in promoting healthy development, school success. And the thing that I work a lot with parents is to help them figure out how to go back and truly engage in emotionally engaged play with young children. A lot of times parents sort of go to that, I'm going to teach you this color is blue and this color is yellow, when really what we want is for them to both be mirroring each other with their expressions, much like we saw in that first video. And so I think that this handout does a little bit of guiding around that. Next slide. In terms of thinking about for this population, when I have a need for a therapist for a privately insured child, I go directly to Psychology Today's website. They have an exquisite way that you can filter things based on where a person lives, how old the child is, gender of the therapist. And so that's where I would look in the insurance type. So this is a great place for privately insured kids. Next slide. These are the agencies in Alameda County that see young children. And I actually also have them divided up by which city they're in. And I could share that with you guys if that would be helpful in the future. I'd be happy to email that out. Next slide. These are just a few more. CTRP is a source when you have a concern about a child who's experienced trauma. They have a nice list on their website of where you can find a trauma-trained therapist for young children. Young children usually depict that by repetitive play. Mind Institute's also a great place you probably already know about to go for articles on these developmental challenges and the play coaching handout that was included. Next slide. Oh, this I thought was nice to include. So many websites are really focused on the needs of moms. And I attended a talk recently, so I stole this from a person who did a talk on dads. And I really like the idea of having multiple sites that we can steer dads to. And I think it's also important to note that dads get and experience postpartum depression. And so there's a support group here specifically for that topic. They're much more likely to experience it if their partner is also having depression or anxiety. Next slide. Susanne, I'm passing this one to you.
My computer froze and I couldn't move my mouse to unmute myself. This is just a list of both developmental screening and social emotional behavioral screening tools. I think the only key to call out here is also the freely available ones. Many of your clinics will already be using the ages and stages or the PEDS for general developmental screening, but the MCHAT, just as important to think about the MCHAT from the newer version, the revised with follow-up. So all the data you see on the MCHAT and its ability to predict children who will later have either developmental delay or autism specifically is based on that revised 20-item revised form with follow-up. So if you're not using those follow-up questions, it's just not as predictive a tool, but can still be a fine screener. And the strengths and difficulties questionnaire, which is freely available if you're not able to have the longer proprietary tools, which I think we use more in specialty clinics than in primary care.
All right, thank you so much,